The top stories: African Development Bank President commends Ethiopia's endeavor for food self-sufficiency. And welcome to EBC World, the voice of Pan-Africanism, with the latest news highlights of the hour. I am Tabitha John. Do stay with us. The Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, held discussions with a special envoy of the African Development Bank, AFDB, on the implementation of the Food and Agriculture Delivery Compacts, focusing on agricultural initiatives. In his social media post, Abiy said that he had the pleasure of receiving Dr. Timothy Williams for the implementation of the Food and Agriculture Delivery Compacts for discussions on agricultural endeavors. It has been said Ethiopia's partnership with the African Development Bank Group is essential to the country's food sovereignty endeavors. In another development, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed discussed with Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs for France, for discussions on ties between the two countries. Ethiopia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Timotheus, met with the President of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, Jean Lekun, at his office. Discussions focused on strengthening the cooperation between Ethiopia and the bank, particularly on shared priorities that can facilitate the partnership. Foreign Minister Gideon briefed the AIIB President on Ethiopia's economic reform efforts, infrastructure development initiatives, green economy projects, and ongoing renewable energy development endeavors. Gideon urged the bank to finance major infrastructure projects in Ethiopia, highlighting the favorable conditions for enhancing the cooperation between Ethiopia and the AIIB. The AIIB President, Jean Lekun, for his part, acknowledged Ethiopia's significant growth potential and its progress in economic development. He expressed the bank's willingness to continue collaborating with the Ethiopian government on expanding key infrastructure networks. UNECA and the African Union Development Agency, New Partnership for Africa's Development, have signed a memorandum of understanding to facilitate joint cooperation and collaboration in African development. UNECA Executive Secretary Claver Gatete and AUDA NEPAD Chief Executive Officer Nardos Bekele Thomas signed the MOU in Addis Ababa. The MOU outlines a collaborative work program for the years 2024 to 2028, focusing on enhanced resilience for sustainable development in Africa in alignment with both AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Agenda 2030. Support African nations, regional economic groups, and the African Union in integrating the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 into their national, regional, and continental development strategic plans are also part of the agreement.
Feed Africa Summit is to help Africa to be able to feed itself. And in fact, it was even more than just food self-sufficiency. It was really about food self-sovereignty and how we actually unlock that capacity and feed the world. And I believe that Africa can and must feed the world. You must be able to take the technology off the shelf and take it to the farmers in the scale of millions. So there must be, what I'm saying, accountability. When people tell me that Africa can feed itself, I say, yes, Africa can. Take a look at Ethiopia. They have done that in a very short period of time to become self-sufficient in wheat and to become, for the first time in its history, a net exporter of wheat. Who says that we can? So well done to you, Ethiopia. Well done to you. Continue that, and you can count on us to continue to support you, and as also we continue to work with WFP.
African Development Bank president commends Ethiopia's endeavor for food self-sufficiency. He reaffirmed AFDB's support and continuous cooperation for such initiatives. Goshumellisau has more.
African Development Bank president made an extended speech on Ethiopia's development in agriculture, finance, innovation, as well as Africa's potential. He commended Ethiopia's endeavor toward food self-sufficiency. He said Africa can feed the world.
There's no doubt that Africa has the potential to feed the world, and it must feed the world. 65% of the uncultivated arable land, it's not in Asia, it's not in Latin America, it's not in the United States, it's in Africa. So what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. Now, the problem, however, is that that future of food that we can actually feed ourselves is under threat. It's under threat from climate change. Today we lose about $7 to $15 billion a year from climate change in Africa. And that will rise to about roughly $50 billion a year by 2030 if the current scenario continues. If there's anything that is more affected, it's agriculture. So crop yields are going to decline in most cases, and therefore it means it will heighten the amount of food insecurity that we have. And so that's why I really want to start by commending Ethiopia for the tremendous work that you have done in terms of your work on wheat, which I will talk about in a moment.
He stressed that technologies can transform Africa's agriculture development, pledging FDB continue to support such initiatives.
Those climate-resilient agricultural technologies, for well over 13 million farmers about 2 years ago, now it's over 21 million farmers. A good example is your country, Ethiopia. Ethiopia, wheat is a temperate crop, but science and technology does do wonders, right? And so we were able to work with ICADA, and I don't know if anybody from ICADA is here. It is one of the CG centers to develop heat-tolerant wheat varieties. Those varieties were provided to farmers in Ethiopia with support from the African Development Bank. Your Excellency, Mr. President, 100,000 metric tons of seed were actually supported, right?
The president also appreciated Ethiopia's government political will to get out of poverty.
So 5 things I just want to say. First, the importance of strong political will, a vision and a strong political will. The Prime Minister Abe has that political will, and we've seen it. But it wasn't just Prime Minister Abe. It built on the work that Prime Minister Desalegn actually did. And so that policy consistency is critical to the success that you're seeing today. In many African countries, unfortunately, when a new government comes in, they say the old program, no matter how good it is, it's out of the way. We are constantly going back to base zero, and then we can build up. So I want to commend the government of Ethiopia for continuing that vision.
Strengthening private partnership and enhancing agricultural value chain are crucial to transform the livelihoods of the community, he underlined.
And finally, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has commented on the 1984 charity song, Do They Know It's Christmas, by Bob Geldof and Midge Ur, which aimed to raise funds for Ethiopia. While acknowledging the song's noble intent, the Prime Minister warned that the outdated imagery and lyrics could perpetuate a negative stereotype of Africa. Tegus Sarnis has the following reportage.
Do They Know It's Christmas, the 1984 charity song written by Bob Geldof and Midge Ur to raise funds for the Ethiopian famine, continues to circulate, now with the same old footage and lyrics. 4 decades later, the song's outdated imagery misrepresents not just Ethiopia, but the entire African continent. While Africa faces its challenges, why are we still seeing the same heartbreaking footage of children to depict an entire continent of 54 countries with diverse culture, economies, and landscapes?
If you actually break down the lyrics, because I think people tend to overlook what the lyric is saying. So one of the lyrics says that there's no peace and joy this Christmas in West Africa, right, or in Africa. And for me, that in itself is not even the truth, because every Christmas, there's millions of people that go to Africa to enjoy themselves. For example, every December, everybody goes to Ghana to have a great time, you know. So first of all, there's no fact and there's no truth in that lyric. And I think I understand his sentiment, right? Because he feels like he has to make people feel sad and feel pity for Africa in order for people to donate their money. But my perspective is that in the whole process of making people feel sorry for Africa, they would never come to Africa because they would just think Africa is a place of poverty, a place where you won't be able to enjoy Christmas, a place where, as the lyrics say, there's death in every tear.
The donation raised back then were appreciated, but Africa, and Ethiopia in particular, now calls for a different kind of help, and into Western interference in political, economic and social spheres of African nations. Colonialism may have officially ended in the 1960s, but its impact lingered hidden in the guise of aid, cooperation and continued exploitation. Colonial powers fragmented African economies, stifled industrialization and fueled division through tribalism and class struggle, all in an effort to maintain control. The effects are still felt today, with proxy wars, coups, and foreign interference keeping Africa from its full potential.
Missionaries opened hospitals and schools throughout the colonies. Sometimes they also furthered the political and economic goals of imperialist nations. Many Europeans exploited and oppressed native Africans. Some of the worst oppression occurred in the Congo.
Ethiopia stands as a unique case in Africa's history, never colonized yet subjected to long periods of puppet governments. However, since 2018, under the leadership of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Ethiopia has undergone a dramatic transformation. Political and economic reforms have been introduced, including the release of political prisoners, the lifting of the state of emergency, the fostering of new trade relationships. Ethiopia now exports wheat to neighboring African nations, Israel, the US, and the Netherlands, and is one of the fastest growing economies in Africa, with a 7.2% growth rate in 2022-23, according to the World Bank. Acknowledging the good intentions behind band aid, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed warned a cause that hasn't evolved with the times risks doing more than harm than good. It's time to recognize Africa's progress and stop reinforcing outdated stereotypes.
If you take action, you get results. If you theorize, you don't get results. So Ethiopia has been taking action. And the action, we are seeing the results, and we are seeing the impact, and everybody's excited. So all African countries should draw lessons and say, even if you have a limited budget, the most difficult step is the first one. Once you take the first, you get momentum.
The global demand for food will grow by 70% by 2050. And above all, here in Africa, ending hunger is possible. This continent has great potential. 60% of the world's available arable land is here. 6 of the fastest growing economies are African countries. Prime Minister Abiy, Ethiopia is one of these successful countries.
Many people across the world, or even in Africa, they don't know Ethiopia. They know Ethiopia of 40 years ago when there were problems. They don't know the beautiful Ethiopia in terms of agricultural production. They don't know the beautiful Ethiopia about the beautification taking place in the country.
You're watching ABC World, the top story. African Development Bank President commends Ethiopia's endeavor for food self-sufficiency. That's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.